read what is in front of us. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. This presentation is called Changing Currents, Career Transitions and Gaps, which is the workshop number four of Dr. Caroline Fraisinet's workshop, Career Navigation for People with Mood Disorders. And I'm going to read a bit of Caroline's bio so all y'all know a little more about her. Here we go. Dr. Caroline Fraissinet is a 2025 DBSA Outstanding Peer Leader Award recipient, serves on the board of directors for DBSA California, and facilitates peer support meetings with DBSA City of Angels. She is the founder of Career Wavelength, a career coaching practice that bridges mental health awareness and career development, helping professionals design careers aligned with their individual needs, values, and life circumstances. Caroline earned her doctorate in organizational change and leadership, researching barriers to equitable career access. Caroline lives with cyclothymia, OCD, and ADHD. You can learn more about her and her practice at www.careerwavelength.com, which I will shortly put into the chat. And just on a personal note, Caroline and I have been on the board of directors for DBSA California for quite some time. And when she visited the national conference in Chicago with DBSA National, that's our headquarters, Caroline was given an extremely prestigious award for being one of the most exceptional peer leaders out there. And so we're so proud to have her with us today. And she really is an expert in the field and is going to really be able to steer us in the right direction as we explore our career pathways. So thank you, Caroline. Take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And I'm so excited to be here. For those of you who've been to the other workshops, welcome back. For those of you who are here the first time, for the first time. So today's presentation is going to be all about career transitions, gaps, breaks, basically any kind of either anticipated or unanticipated career changes. So that's a little bit of context on that. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. At this point in the presentation, just make sure to keep your microphones on mute. I'll certainly cue you when it's time to turn your microphones off. We'll have some activities where you can kind of chime in. Feel free to put your camera on if you are comfortable. No worries if not. And I'll have Q&A and sort of things as we're going along, but if I don't get to it, just feel free to put them in the chat and I'll get to as many as I can at the end. I leave plenty of time for Q&A. So we'll start with that in terms of our housekeeping. This is our agenda. So first we're going to talk about planned career changes. So that's anything like, I've been working in this area for a while, not quite sure what I want to do next. But you might be in a job at that time. It could be even a planned leave, like if you are going to have a baby or whatnot, or going on family leave, anything like that. Then we're going to transition to unplanned career changes, where some sort of circumstance comes up where you are not anticipating a career change at that time, and kind of talk through that. Um, I will talk about in both of them leading with skills in applications, and I'll show you a really effective technique to show your skill set in a resume. We'll go over the emotional aspects of career change and transition because there are many. And then we'll wrap up and have some time for Q&A. So with that, I'm Caroline. I'm a career advisor and consultant. I do all things career. I have for quite some time. I used to work in higher ed. Now I've got my own practice. But I also live with cyclothymia, OCD, and ADHD. And cyclothymia is on the bipolar spectrum. Sometimes it's the little known cousin of bipolar 1 and 2. So I always like to say that as well. My perspective with all of the things I'm going to say today are in my work as a career advisor and somebody specializing in career development, doctoral level research in organizational behavior through my doctorate. And first and foremost, lived experience. I am a peer first and foremost. I am not, I've studied this a lot. I do have experience, but I am not somebody who has all the answers. These are things that I struggle with too. I like to always start with that. I'm a peer first and foremost. And I'm so honored to be able to do these events through the community to share my knowledge, just through my own career and whatnot, and help other people to navigate it as well. So, with that said, again, we're going to be discussing two kinds of career changes, the planned ones and the unplanned ones, because they take into account a couple of different things with each scenario. So, a lot of the things today we're going to talk about are okay, well, if this is the scenario, then this is kind of what you do and whatnot. So, obviously, this is not going to encompass everything, but I've included a couple of things that are I see more commonly than others with my clients. So we'll start with planned changes. So this is making an intentional choice to change your career path or direction. So this could be, I'm working in this job for a really long time, but I don't know that it's something that I want to continue with. This is something that I've experienced many times. I couldn't even tell you how many times. So this is one where you do have the time to think about it and, look before you leap into that new job. So couple of types of pivots when we think about changing roles. So one of them is an industry pivot. So you might be doing the same kind of work, but in a different industry. So you might, for example, work in entertainment and you want to pivot to higher ed. That was one that I did. But you're doing a similar job in both of them. So I was a coordinator in entertainment, and I transitioned into being a project coordinator at higher ed. So it's a little bit of, I have the skill set, I'm just applying it to a different industry. There's also role pivots. That's the same industry, but a different role. Using again that same example, eventually I moved off of project coordinating to career advising. So that was within the same industry, it was within higher ed, but a totally different job. And then there's full pivots, which are you're transitioning from a different industry and role entirely. So that's really sort of like you start off as one job and then you're doing something totally different. So it's the combination of the two, essentially. So these are the main kinds of pivots that I see that there are. So we'll start with that. The first thing I recommend in any of these cases is to gather information. Changing your career is a calculated risk. You want to make sure that you're getting as much information as possible before you do that, because honestly, it'll save you time, money, frustration down the line if you already kind of have a sense of what you're moving into. So that could be, I got the information before I feel more secure about jumping into that industry. Or it could simply be, oh, you know what? I learned more about this. I thought it was something I wanted, and it turns out I don't. You've saved yourself the time and energy in that case to not have gone through the whole leap, have your career and money sort of tied up with that change before you move over there. So getting the information is really helpful in this case. There's a couple different ways you can do that. The first thing I recommend is research. So, a couple of areas that are worth researching, and I'll have a sheet as well that I'll give out to everybody who registered today that has some different places you can look for this information. But a couple of things I recommend researching before you start actively applying to jobs in a different industry or role or any kind of career change. Insights into the industry. So if you're changing industries, you kind of want to get a sense of what does it look like right now, especially with things changing so much with AI. The typical roles and tasks that are in positions within that industry, or within a position you're looking to transition to. The skill sets that are needed within that position. Companies in that area. So you want to know the main companies within that industry to get a sense of the landscape. Population served. It could be, especially with nonprofits or something like that, you could be working with one population and then moving to work with another one. the qualifications that are needed for positions you might be interested in, and of course, the average salary. So, this is all information that you can gather online. I really recommend ONET, which will be in the resource sheet as well, which is kind of a repository of information on industries, jobs, skill sets, and whatnot. But certainly, a Google search will help as well. So, these are some areas I recommend researching before you jump in. One thing that I always have to remind myself with pretty much everything, but certainly with job things, is I I say this a lot where it's sort of like you go from A to Z, where it's like I need a new job, but I don't have the experience, so it's not going to happen. So what I'm really doing is I'm jumping too far ahead. I haven't gathered all the information in between. Um, that is important to be able to actually take the steps to get to Z. So what I encourage is, right now your goal is simply to learn more about a potential career path, not to take action quite yet. So I recommend just taking a beat, not getting too discouraged, but just seeing it as I'm learning more about something that I'm interested in before I make those actions. So an exercise I like to do sometimes, especially when I'm thinking too far ahead, is to think about the low-hanging fruit in terms of learning. So I'll have a little activity here. Think about a career path, a job, an industry, something that interests you. Then what you're going to do is you think of just one way to learn more about it. That could be I'm going to Google search this particular thing, or I'm going to read an article about this. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to, maybe I'm going to go talk to somebody I know about this. Um, and you're going to identify the simplest first step towards learning more about that you can do this week. So I will put on the timer for about 3 minutes. I think 3 minutes should be good. Timer, do 3 minutes. Right. All right, so feel free to write it down. We'll check in via chat in a minute, but first activity of the day. All right. I already see some great stuff here in the chat. I see, okay, professional organizations for grant writing. Look online at organizations serving this field. Yeah, great idea. In the link that I'll send you for ONET, they have a great repository of different professional organizations. So that's a great first step. Open to changing careers. We'll get an informational interview. Yes, we're actually going to be talking about informational interviews in the next section. So I'll give you a bunch of tips that'll be helpful for that. Poke around Reddit or for a specific company or industry to see what people are talking or complaining about. I love that, Kate. Yeah, I do the same. When I'm trying to research something, I want to hear from real people who work there. And Reddit's a great place to find that. Working in astronomical planetary sciences and astrophysics. Oh, that's awesome. First step is finding a good graduate program. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, looking into how you can what you'd study and whatnot. What are the good programs? Yeah, absolutely. Great idea. Join an online course in the industry I'm interested in. Always a great way. Want to find a way, even with volunteering, where I can have a positive impact on girls in foster care. Probably could get a few tidbits by calling a contact. Yeah, absolutely. Let's know that college roommate. Yeah, so you've already identified a few people who might be good to reach out to, which is a perfect transition into getting into our new next topic, which is informational interviews. So the title can sound a little bit scary sometimes, especially when I worked with college students. They're like, "Oh God, an informational interview." Essentially, it's just having a brief conversation with somebody to learn more about their career path, their occupation, to ask advice, all of those things. You're just talking to somebody who's doing the job, or working in the industry and asking their perspective on it. So. This is a great way to gather information, especially if you know the person, you've already established a rapport. Hearing it right from a person who's doing it is always a great way to gather information. So, one of my core philosophies is if I want to know something, ask. I see a lot of times people strategizing like, oh, well, what do they want? And what such and such, especially in marketing, sometimes I feel like it's like, oh, we don't know what this person wants. Ask. Asking is always a great way to sort of find out more information. So it's a big decision. So going into it with as much information as possible, again, it lowers that risk. Um, and I just did a little play on the DBSA motto here. Ask people who've been there, they may be able to help. So a few tips here, just based on my own experience with informational interviews and hearing from clients and whatnot. Um, One of the things I would recommend is researching people whose careers genuinely interest you. You can find out a lot of information on people through LinkedIn, or simply, listening to podcasts or whatnot. Any way that you kind of discover things, look at the person's career, to the extent that you're able to, and think about some people who genuinely interest you. If you're interested in a specific organization somebody is working in, I recommend, and I've had a lot of success with this in recent years too, framing it as, I'm interested in this company. I see that you work there. How do you feel about working there? Rather than anything in terms of like, I want to work there. Tell me what it's like and everything. If you frame it as, I'm curious to hear about the workplace culture. First off, you'll probably get a little bit more honest advice that way, or honest perspective on it. Because they're looking at it as, do I really enjoy working here or not? Or if they do, I mean, that's a great sign. But also they're saying, yeah, and this is really why. That it'll kind of get them thinking about it on a bigger picture scale. So that's one way I frame it if you're interested in an individual organization. Um, Mention why they are reaching out to why you're reaching out to them specifically, especially on LinkedIn. At this point, I feel like I get maybe 10 connection requests a day, and most of the time nobody puts, sort of an indication of how they know me or what they want to connect about. I'm always happy to connect with people where we have similar interests, but especially with those kind of social networking platforms, if somebody doesn't put this is why I'm reaching out to you, then I'm a little bit more guarded about it, than I would be if somebody was saying like, I saw your background. I'm doing this kind of similar thing. I was curious if you'd like to connect, or I'd love to learn more about X, Y, and Z. So just mention specifically why them. That's more likely to get them to respond. Um, Frame is asking for their perspective as somebody doing the job. Um, do not ask for a job. Most of the time, with informational interviews, the person is not the hiring manager. So just making sure to say, like, I'm really just getting your perspective person to person. Have your questions prepared, be organized. Ask at the end of the interview if there's someone else after having talked to you that they think you should reach out to. This is a great way to sort of snowball into getting more and more contacts in the industry, and you get more perspectives on the same kind of thing. So that's always a good way to go about it. And send a thank you email afterwards. You're certainly welcome to send a handwritten one, but especially recently, I feel like the mail has been so slow. um, it's, I would recommend if you are going to send them something, still send them an email first because that'll get to them right away. So just sending a little note of gratitude for them giving you a little bit of time, that's always a nice gesture as well. So I have a little bit of a template here in terms of requesting a meeting with somebody. So, hello, my name is so and so. I'm reaching out because then you say what it is that interests you about them specifically. I wanted to talk to you about this because whatever. I'd love to hear your perspective on whatever it is that you want their perspective on. So it could be the company, it could be the industry they work in, it could be the particular job they're doing. Would you be open to a 15-minute conversation in coming weeks? I usually like to say 15 minutes because again, that's an easier thing for somebody to say yes to. Thank you and hope to hear from you soon. Just keeping it short and simple. Something like that really kind of conveys, I'm interested in hearing your perspective. Here's why. Do you have time? Um, this is one that I've developed over time and I found it's usually pretty successful. So where do you find people to talk to? So LinkedIn is a great one. I've actually bolded the ones that I've had the most success with myself, and I've heard from other people that they've had the most success with. But that's not to say that any of these are not worth your time or whatnot. It just depends on the individual person. But LinkedIn's a great one to start with because social network, you can find people that way pretty easily. Friends and family, of course, if you have those kind of connections, definitely talk to them. Alumni associations, if you graduated from a school that has an alumni association. Professional organizations for the desired industry. That's really helpful. That one I found a lot of informational interview people through because it's already set up where they're open to that anyway. So, if you're both in a professional organization for a particular industry, they're wanting to connect with other people who are in and around that industry. And a lot of times they do a lot of educational programming or whatnot for people learning about the industry. So it makes it a little bit of an easier in if you're coming from it that way. So that is one that I always do recommend. Former colleagues. So if you know somebody from a previous job who's now working at a place that you're interested in, connecting with them is a great way to sort of hear what's going on with them and also what it's like there. People in your local community, DBSA counts. So, if you find out somebody's doing some sort of work that's interesting to you, feel free to just sort of be like, hey, ask them a question or two about like, what do you like working there? Like, what do you typically do and everything? Just showing interest in that way is a good way to sort of meet people. Local networking groups. It depends on where you are. I'm in Los Angeles, so obviously there's a ton of them. But, it just depends on what your community around you is like. But there are virtual ones as well. Conferences are a great one. Again, same thing as the professional organizations where they're all coming together to connect with each other and talk to each other about the industry, the field, whatnot. So they're already kind of primed for these kind of conversations. Following up after a webinar or panel, you can you can reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in. But that's always a great way to connect with people is, hey, I saw your presentation or I heard you speak on this panel. Like, thank you so much for doing that. I would love to connect with you and everything. Depending on how high profile the person is, they might not reach out to you right away or you might not hear back, but they're already open to talking to people just by the nature of them giving a webinar or speaking on a panel. So that's a great way to sort of prime someone essentially and say like, I saw your presentation. And you already know from the perspective of the speaker that they are familiar with what you do. So it kind of just cuts into the conversation a little faster. Um, and cold contacting if done right. So that, if you are going to cold contact somebody, I've definitely had success doing that too. I would just recommend kind of framing it like that template response that I had before, just making it really clear, like, this is how I found you. This is why I want to talk to you. So that can also be a really effective way to reach out to people. So that just kind of gives you a sense of places to look, people who might be in your network already or near your network that can give you a perspective on things. So as a quick activity here, think of one or two people whose careers interest you. This doesn't have to be somebody you know. It could be somebody that is, maybe famous or something like that. This is just an activity to get you thinking about what it is that interests you about a person and their career. So, this could be, oh, I want to talk to Oprah or something like that. Just think about why them and what is a question you'd like to ask them career wise. I'll put 3 minutes again on the clock, and then we'll connect via chat and we'll talk out loud and we'll keep on going. This over. All right, there you go. All right. So I tried to do this activity myself and I was, I was having trouble thinking of somebody and what their question, what a question would be. So I just also want to acknowledge this can be kind of tricky sometimes. Um, but let's see what we've got here. We've got a great response here. I want to interview someone in grant writing organization locally and know the executive director of a deaf center in Pasadena who I'd like to chat with some more. That's awesome. That's a great example of that. You know, you already kind of know what industry. Let's see here. No idea how to find this person, but I would love to talk to someone in my field who manages a similar diagnosis. How do they handle such a high stress occupation? Yeah, so in that case, that might be, depending on what your diagnosis is and whatnot, finding an organization like DBSA, and just sort of seeing if you know anybody who's also doing similar work or whatnot. So that's another kind of angle you can come at, is, if you have another shared interest and you find out, oh, they're doing this for work, just asking them like, yeah, how do you get into that and how are you managing it? That's a great question to ask as well. Um, yeah. Yeah, those are great. I still am like coming up with like I know the minute that this presentation is done, I will think of like 10 people. But those are great that you kind of came up with those. So yeah, just keep thinking about those and reaching out. Oh, President Zelensky, perseverance under pressure, coordination of so many defense efforts, constant communicate. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that guy has quite a job. So that is a good person to talk to for sure. All right. Well, great job. We're going to move on to unplanned career changes. So these are unanticipated circumstances that necessitate a change in one's career. So this can be a break, a gap, any kind of thing where it's like, I did not anticipate this change happening, but I have to navigate this change now. So in this case, obviously there's any number of different changes, but just for the sake of simplicity here, I broke it up into two kinds of unplanned transitions. One is if you go on leave from the job that you're at, but you intend to go back either, if you're a freelancer picking up another project after one finishes, you have a little bit of a break there, or you're going on like a medical leave or some sort of leave from your current job and going back to it. And then there's just a career break. So that is a full break from work for any situation. Obviously, that simplifies it to very, very simple degree. But just for the purposes of this presentation, to have you thinking about things, I broke it up into these two areas. So we'll start with returning from leave. The main thing that I recommend in these cases is being prepared and understanding your triggers before you start back again. So when you're on leave, you want to kind of think about what are the things that stress me out? Did any of those come up in my job? And how do I mitigate that when I do go back to my position? Um, so a few tips here. Understand your triggers, how they impact you, of course. Good sleep hygiene. We as people with mood disorders, we have more sensitive circadian rhythms, so that's always something to consider. Keeping your work-life boundaries firm, especially when you're returning to work, because you want to make sure that you're easing yourself into it. So make sure that those work-life boundaries are really firm, to the extent that you can, of course. Setting attainable goals. I'm really excited about this one because I found out about this term not too long ago. So there are SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, et cetera, et cetera. I recently learned about smarter goals, which add two more things on the end, which is evaluate. So once you've made the goal, you're evaluating like, how did it go? And then R, I've seen it either reestablish, recalibrate based on how you evaluated it, or I've seen reward. I like reward better, but that's a way to build on it and recognize like this is a continuous process of setting goals, seeing how they're working out, and recognizing that I accomplished this thing, or I'm going to rebuild and do something that builds on that next time. So I have that in the resource sheet too, broken down. But I really enjoyed learning about that. I learned that from another career coach recently. Create a regular routine, try to keep your times consistent, with when you're getting to bed, when you're getting up, when you're eating, all of those kinds of things. I did a whole presentation on that too before. So that's also important in easing yourself back in. Um, Taking it slow, easing your way back in. Yeah. Be aware that things may be different now and try not to hold yourself to the pre-break normal. I'll get into this a little bit more later, in terms of recognizing that what might have been your normal before might not be your normal now. So we'll talk again about negative self-talk and how that relates as well. But just realize that things might be a little bit different, and the normal for you might be a different situation. Check in with yourself often to see how you're feeling. Having a keeping track of like a mood journal is a good thing to do in this circumstance, just to continually make sure you're feeling okay. You're noticing your triggers if they're coming up. Have a plan in place if you need support or notice symptoms returning. This is a great thing to do while you're on that break, so that you're prepared going back in, and celebrate wins. That's something, I really struggle with. I keep pushing myself, pushing myself, pushing myself, and don't recognize, hey, I'm getting my bearings back. All things considered, I might not have gotten it all the way back to where I want to be, but I did this thing today, and that was important. So recognizing and celebrating your wins. Again, those smarter goals are good for that too. So, requesting accommodations. Sometimes reasonable accommodations can be made in the workplace to make things a little bit more manageable upon your return, as mood disorders are considered disabilities under ADA. I am going to preface this with I'm not an expert in accommodations and the employment law aspect, but I can talk you through a little bit of it, just in terms of things to think about. Um, but some common ADA accommodations, and there's a list of them that will be in your resource sheet, include adjusted start and end times, which can be great, if you find I can't get up at 7 a.m. anymore, like I have med side effects, or it's just that was messing with my circadian rhythm. That's why I had an episode. Asking for an adjusted start and end time. Um, I also want to preface all of this with, in terms of reasonable, it will depend on the individual position. So, the example I always love to give is you can't ask to work from home if you work at a quarry. So, if it's by the nature of the position, in that case, you really would need to be on site to like mine stones or whatnot. So in the context of what the job is, some of these might not be possible, but within other contexts, they might be reasonable. So, depending on what the position is, adjusted start time and end times is one that might be relevant. Extra breaks or time off for doctor's appointments. So if you need to get to the doctor, at 3 p.m., and your shift normally ends at 4, seeing if you can get out of work a little bit earlier to go to that doctor's appointment. Noise canceling headphones, that was a big one for me. I'm sound sensitive, so that was a really big game changer for me in the workplace. Daylight lamps, especially if you have seasonal affective disorder. So that has to do with the light, a lot of times with daylight savings time and whatnot changing. Those can be really helpful in terms of managing seasonal depression. Working in a quieter or less busy area of the office, if you're in person. So, they might not be able to let you work from home completely, but maybe they can help you work in a quieter area, less foot traffic, or work out of a break room or something. Um, Anything that will kind of help you manage your conditions, but won't functionally impact them in any way. Um, Working from home, again, if it's a reasonable request, depending on the individual job you have. Adjustments in communication. This is something that sometimes people don't realize they can ask for. If you find that you work better with written instructions, and when somebody's telling you them verbally, like you don't remember things, that is something that you can ask for an adjustment on. Also, more regular feedback, that can be useful as well. All of these are itemized on this website, JAN, which is Job Accommodation Network. That'll be in your resource sheet too. So these are just some ideas. Some will work. Your mileage will vary depending on what your actual job is, but some ideas to get you thinking about it. You also control how much you disclose. So mood disorders are medical conditions. You can keep it as simple as that. When I worked in an office full time, I did. You can say you have a chronic medical condition that had a flare up. Um, HR might request a letter. That is something that you can work with your doctor on. You will what you feel comfortable saying, what they feel comfortable saying, what will suffice for HR. But just remember as well, you're in control of how much that you disclose and what you're comfortable with. Um, and framing it as I have a condition that flared up, it's now managed. I found that that's kind of an elegant sidestep for people to not ask more questions most of the time. But again, empowering yourself to sort of, I don't have to share that information, or I'll share this amount of information I'm comfortable with. So that's another thing worth considering. So navigating a break. So when you need to leave a position for any reason, sometimes it can be hard to communicate that in your application. So let's discuss some strategies on how to approach that. Leading with skills. So again, transferable skills. There are certain skills that you're going to learn in any number of ways that are going to be helpful for an individual job. And the goal is to sort of highlight those skills. And there is a format based on this concept of skills-based hiring, which is becoming more and more popular within recruiting circles, which is essentially hiring employees based on developed skills rather than traditional criteria like degree or job titles. Most of the time when you see this talked about, it is related to degrees. So they're saying, people gain experience in any number of ways. They don't necessarily need to have a bachelor's degree for that. But I think it applies to anything too. Whatever your experience is and the things that you've gone through, it develops skills in one way or another. And I'll talk about that individual piece of it a little bit later in the presentation too. But just know that this has become very popular on the recruiter end. This is a very hot topic right now. So skills-based hiring is something that you can use to communicate your experience. So to give you an idea of different skills you can point to, the NACE core competencies. So this I actually learned about when I worked in higher ed. There's an organization called the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So they primarily work with students having career education within school and then when they graduate. So these are the 8 core competencies that employers have identified that they want in candidates. So these are, things like critical thinking or, teamwork, technology, communication. There's a longer list. Again, that'll be in your resource sheet, but it it's all things that you can communicate in different ways. There's not really a job title necessarily that conveys that. And there's not a specific job that conveys that. So there are different ways you can approach it, kind of knowing that these are the skills that people are interested in. So one way to do this is formatting your resume in a different way. So you can express your skills and experience by flipping the script, essentially, and I'll show you an example of this. It'll highlight the relevant experience across your jobs rather than keeping it itemized by the individual position. So instead of, I worked at this company for this amount of time, and here's all the things that I did, you're organizing it by this is the skill that you mentioned is important to you. Here's how I demonstrated it in all of the things that I'm doing. So essentially, you're kind of organizing it in a different way. But you're also kind of tailoring it to their individual position. Um, Again, this will make a little bit more sense once I show you an example. But um, when you're looking at a job listing, usually you'll kind of see what they're wanting. So, there might be a position where they're saying, oh, we really want somebody who's a good communicator, someone who's very organized and whatnot. You're kind of getting a sense of some of the skills that they're looking for. So, in that case, if they're mentioning that, do one for communication and say, I develop communication in these different ways. And then, for organizational skills, I learned it because of this, or I've used it in these particular ways. Um, your objective statement speaks to why you want to apply to the position at this time. Um, 3 to 4 skills usually for what they are. And at this point, I think it just makes more sense if I show you. So I'm going to just jump right ahead to our exciting activity. Hopefully this works well, because I just came up with it like 2 days ago. But I've developed some skills-based resumes. All of these are fictional characters. I'm curious to see if you can guess whose is whose. So let me open it up and I'll put let me see if I can do a timer along with this. I'll set a timer on my phone. But I'll put 1 minute on the clock. Yep. All right. So here's the first one. Make it a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit more easily. All right. So I'll give you a minute here. Read through this person's resume and let me know if you can guess who it is. And I'll scroll down a little bit too, so you can kind of see their job experience too. You got it, Daniel. It's Spider-Man. So, all of these have some sort of reason why they can't say what it is that they actually did or what happened. So, in this case, he's Spider-Man. He's literally a superhero, so he can't really speak to that too directly. So, he says like in this case, he actually does have quite a bit of experience, but when he's talking about community engagement, he can't reveal himself to be Spider-Man, but he can kind of talk around it a little bit. Consistent, unpaid commitment to community safety, crisis response. So this is one way you can kind of talk about it. Even if it's not a traditional job or whatnot, those are skills that are valuable for many jobs. I'm glad you liked it, Krish. I was like, I don't know whether I'm overthinking this or whatnot, but this is example one. Let's try another one. Let me see. This one's a little bit over here. All right. Make this a little bit bigger without showing who it is. All right. All right. So let me know uh, if anybody can guess who this is. Yep, you got it, Abigail. It's Barbara M. Roberts, who's Barbie. So, Barbie has 60 years of experience doing any number of things. So, boiling it down to if she was applying for a position where it seemed like this is kind of what they're looking for, she could pick out kind of the things that are relevant to those particular skills that might be on that particular position. So, it's kind of like, what do you do if you're literally the president, a surgeon, a fashion model, all that. So, this is also a way to sort of narrow it down if you have a lot of different types of experience, to showcase what's most relevant to that position. Um, we'll do one more. I'm curious if people know this one. Let me see if I can do it without. Let me stop sharing for a second, just because I want to make sure it doesn't show the name. All right, let's see. Full screen. That way it's a, oh, I can't do it that way. All right, let me just make it a little bit bigger because it was a little bit small. All right, let me share my screen again. Hopefully this is a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, there we go. So this is the next one. Scroll down a little bit more. Scroll down a little bit more. That might give you more of a hint. This one might just be the type of shows that I watch too. Okay. In the interest of time, I could do this all day, by the way. So this is me cutting myself off. So yes, it is Kimmy Schmidt. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody has seen The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but um she was trapped in a bunker for 15 years. When she was like in seventh grade, I want to say. So when she got out, she didn't have any like experience to point to. So this is how she frames it as she has experience because she definitely has skills. So she frames it as crisis support, peer mentorship, community cohesion, because she was kind of the glue that held them all together. But that's a way that she's able to highlight those skills even if she hasn't had traditional employment. The last one I'll just show you and kind of talk you through. Let's see here. So I don't know if anybody's seen the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, but I did one for Rebecca Bunch, who's the main character. So Rebecca has quite a bumpy career. She started off as a lawyer. She moved to West Covina for a guy, even though she says it's not for a guy. But then she ultimately, transitions into the arts and everything. So, she speaks to the different experiences she's had, work history, essentially, because she's had different experiences, she's kind of doing something totally different. Um, that's one way that she can communicate that. So I had a lot of fun doing this. So I'm hoping to do more of these. But it's an exercise in showing like different ways that you can demonstrate your experience on a resume by showing the different skills that are involved. And the listing itself will kind of guide you in that. My field applicants are typically asked for a project list. Yes, so that sometimes especially with arts and entertainment, that they'll ask for your portfolio. So that'll be a completely different situation where you can sidestep the skills base or the traditional like chronological thing too. So portfolio is also a way to sort of show your skills in that way. Excellent point. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so now we're going to talk about the emotional impact or the emotional aspects of a career change. Can be an emotional roller coaster. Here's some common themes I notice in my work with clients, and some strategies that might be helpful. So, negative self-talk. This can look like feeling like you've wasted time in a career path that's no longer serving you, feeling like you failed by taking a break or changing paths, feeling behind career-wise compared to others. So, your own flavor of negative self-talk will take its own its own flavor. But these are some of the things that I've experienced and that I've heard a lot from clients. A few things I like to bring up here. So when I was in my doctoral program, we read this book called The Diversity Bonus. And the author had talked about how diversity of experience, even just going beyond the way people normally, within the context of work anyway, interpret diversity to be like people from different backgrounds and everything, which of course is important too. A diversity of experience can lead to stronger teams because people are thinking about things in different ways, and that can show that there's a quantifiable, measurable value add because people are bringing their own individual experiences to it. So, your experience can be a tremendous thing for organizations. There's a measurable impact on how thinking about things differently can really strengthen a team. And by the individual experiences that you have, you're going to have something that someone else might not. So that's one thing I do like to bring up. I was just so blown away by that book that I love sharing that. Changing paths takes strength. Acknowledging a truth that something is no longer serving you signals self-insight. That's one way that you can kind of look at it as well. I certainly think it's a big strength to recognize, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore. That's a strength rather than a weakness, in my opinion, anyway. Comparison. So sometimes we say we're behind, or everyone will say this and this. One of the things that I've done to sort of catch myself in it is to think about who is literally saying that. In terms of like, okay, this person says I'm behind. Is a person literally saying that to me? Or are they not? I've found most of the time the answer is no one's saying it, or I'm saying it to myself. Now, there are circumstances where maybe somebody is saying it to you, and that's its own situation. But I do find that most of the time, these sort of comparisons in terms of I'm behind or whatnot, um, it might be coming from inside or not from anybody at all. So that's one thing I also like to bring up. Some of the things that I tend to compare about. This is the strategy I typically use for myself. So I wanted to bring that up as well. This is a really interesting concept that I came across. Last month's presentation was all about social rhythm therapy, interpersonal social rhythm therapy, which has to do with your managing your moods and your cycles of energy in a way that's going to affect your mood. So one of the concepts within it is that grief is one of the four major areas that can cause these mood dysregulations. And that includes grief for the lost healthy self. This can look like anger or sadness over lost hopes or aspirations, whether that is the fact or not, the feeling, loss or interruption of an anticipated trajectory because of one's illness, and implications of having a chronic illness. So that could be stigma, expectations, et cetera, et cetera. So that sort of feeling of grief for things are not the same way that they used to be. It's valid. It's a feeling many people experience. It's certainly a feeling that I've experienced before. But this is something that is recognized within interpersonal social rhythm therapy. So the advice that's given here is to treat it like the valid feeling that it is, grief. Um, Identify the loss you're feeling. Think about, is it altered expectations of where my career was going to take me? Is it a lost opportunity? Decreased spontaneity? Maybe you have to stay with a specific schedule or you can't do things that you used to do. Um, Explore your emotions about it. What are the individual feelings that you're having related to it? And separate yourself from your identity. You are not what you do for work. And I know it's the first question people often ask at like a cocktail party or whatnot, but you're so much more than what you do for work. And that's, if anything you take away today, that's what I hope somebody would take away is that you're so much more than your job title. And your feelings are valid and everything, but just don't, I would encourage you not to boil yourself down to just that. Overwhelm. So it's a lot to apply to jobs. I was thinking about putting a whole slide that just said the job application process is annoying. I was thinking of doing like a big slide on that, but I ultimately took it out. So it could be exhaustion with the concept of starting over again, frustration over perceived lack of progress, or just not knowing where to even begin because it's so much of a thing to even start applying to jobs. Um, the main thing, this is something I'm experiencing a lot right now, having just started my own practice and whatnot, and just being like, oh, there's so many things that need to go into it. Sometimes just recognizing it is not your end state and considering what you can do for the time being to make things feel a little bit better as you're making that transition. That's been the thing that's helped me at least. And it's something worth considering. I have an activity here. Based on the areas that we just discussed, is there anything that resonated with you that you recognize within your own experience? And what is one small way you can be kinder to yourself during this period of time? I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock just so I make sure. I think this is the last part of the presentation, then we'll open it up for Q&A. But I'll give you a little bit of time to think about this too. We'll do 3 minutes. Right. All right. I'm starting to see some great stuff coming in here. Let's see here. I think I need to cultivate a habit of positive self-talk. I can do this by setting small goals and congratulating myself slash reminding myself whenever I make some small progress. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the smarter goals are really helpful for that because again, it goes back to reward. And that's why I like that variant more too. It's important to reward and sort of recognize when you're making progress. Great. Uh, Not a superhero, but I do have mad writing skills, and like Barbie, I have a bit of range of job experience. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, more stable now than when I was working. Stayed home to take care of my kids. That there's a lot of transferable skills with that. To get to bipolar under control, much better, and can contribute a consistent present at work. That's fabulous. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Da, grief of lost healthy self. Yeah, absolutely. Learn self to past self and just focus on one moment at a time. Absolutely. Yeah. Grief, so much grief. Yeah. It's hard and it's getting something a significant diagnosis like bipolar. I know we talk about in our group a lot of times like those feelings immediately after you get the diagnosis. It's hard. And so, taking it one day at a time, as some people have said here, and just again acknowledging it's hard. It is grief. Is that's I'm glad that that resonated with you. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, for being vulnerable here. I really feel honored that you felt comfortable to share. Um, so my final wrap-up slide here. Transitions are part of the path. Your value doesn't pause when your career does. You don't have to figure this out alone, and you don't have to figure it all out today. My own particular brand of negative self-talk is like, we got to get this solved right now. And I A to Z it. To the best of your ability, try to A to B it rather than A to Z it. And just recognize people are here to help, and it's one step in a longer journey. So with that said, these are the references for the things I talked about today. You will get a resource sheet if you've signed up on Eventbrite or whatnot. Thank you so much. I am so grateful that you took the time to join me today. My contact information is here. Again, my website is there. I will share in the chat. I do have a newsletter if you want to join my newsletter list. Uh, Absolutely optional. But with that said, I do want to leave lots of time for Q&A. I do turn the recording off during that part just so people feel comfortable to share a little bit more, because we are talking about work. But thank you so much. This was such a pleasure, and thank you. I really appreciate it.
So